Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 22nd of January 2014. And joining me for this edition, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
If you screw this up, you'll be flying a cargo plane full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong.
Games Editor Mark Botwright.
Hey Goose, you big stud.
And Audio Reviewer Ed Selley.
Negative Ghost Rider, the pattern is full.
Welcome back to the AVForums podcast. We are back weekly every Wednesday, so please join us every Wednesday for what can only be described as what, Ed?
Soft, strong and thoroughly absorbent?
Excellent.
All right, guys, wrong tagline.
So let's move on quickly. We go to hardware news, and Sony had their UK launch event today at the time of recording, which is Monday. And Steve, after sitting in the motorway for 3 hours, actually got there. So what was shown?
Well, Phil, it was predominantly what we saw at CES, but in a lot more detail. So this time we actually got model numbers and a look at the actual TVs that will be launched this year. My initial impression was very much like we were saying last week, I think, on the podcast previously, which is that there was a bit of swagger to Sony at CES, and looking at their lineup that they've got for 2014 in the UK, it's a strong lineup. It's not, it's not earth-shattering or game-changing, but it's a solid lineup of some really good-looking, attractive, well-designed, AV equipment, particularly in terms of the TV lineup. So kicking off at the bottom end of the range, we have the R4. The R4 will come in 32 and 40-inch screen sizes, 1080p for the 40-inch and 720p for the 32-inch. That's basically their entry model. Then we've got the W7, which is 32, 42, and 50-inch screen sizes. That's kind of their mid-range TV. 1080p, obviously, comes in black or silver, has the new one-flick feature available, which is for navigating their smart TV platform, Extra Reality Pro and 200 Hz. Then there's W8, which comes in 42, 50, and 55-inch screen sizes. The 42 inches 400 Hz and the 50 and 55 are 800 Hz. Extra Reality Pro, but Motion Flow, sorry, that's Motion Flow, plus Extra Reality Pro, of course. That level adds 3D. And then moving on from that, we have the topper end of the scale. So there's a W85, which comes in this one screen size, 60 inch. And this adds the basic difference between this and the W8 is this adds the wedge shape. So the design we were talking about in last week's podcast, the kind of the wedge shape that Sony are using on some of their TVs, on the higher end TVs, that adds that. So that obviously means it's got more space for bigger speakers, so therefore improved sound. Then we move on to W95, which comes in 55 and 65 inch screen sizes. Again, wedge design. It's got all the new PQ features, so things that we were talking about again last week: dynamic contrast, Extra Reality Pro, and triluminous panel. And then that's still 1080p. That we haven't got to their sort of the 4K lineup. That starts with the X85. That's a 4K TV, going to be in screen sizes of 49 inches, 55 and 65. So like we saw with LG, we should be seeing a 49-inch Sony 4K TV for around the 2K marker. They didn't actually give any pricing yet today, but I'm guessing if that's where LG are pricing or aiming to price, then Sony won't be far behind. So that's good news if you're looking for a 4K TV this year and you don't want to spend a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, a couple of grand for a 4K TV is pretty attractive, I've got to say. That one isn't the wedge designs. Actually, it's got the sort of little trestle feet at the bottom, but it's actually not a wedge shape. To get the full 4K wedge, full-on size, screen size, that's going to be X9. The X9 is 55 and 65 inches. It's got the wedge shape. It's got all the PQ features. Basically, it's almost their top-of-the-line TV. There is actually one above that. They didn't have it at the event today, but you and I saw it, Phil, at CES week before last, which is the X95, which is the big 85-inch with the rather unattractive. It looks a bit like a sort of a blackboard on those really big feet. That has a full backlight array, actually, which is the big difference between that and the X9. And obviously, it's a very big screen size, 85 inches. So I've got to say, that's a really strong lineup of TVs. All the 4K sets include HDMI 2.0 and HEVC decoding. I mean, I was impressed. They also had on show some of their sound bars, the Blu-ray players for this year. But it was really the TV lineup that we were most interested in, because there wasn't much info in terms of model numbers and stuff at CES. So at least we've got that now. And I was impressed with it. I mean, I've got to say, I thought that the lineup last year looked good. in terms of picture quality. Certainly the W9 and the X9 that I reviewed, I thought were both really, really top drawer tellies. And looking at what we saw at CES and what I saw today in terms of the demonstrations they were doing it against the Samsung. They were really picking on this poor Samsung TV. But I thought that again, I think it's a really strong lineup there. I'm not totally sold on the wedge shape. I understand the reasons behind it. It's to improve the audio quality of the TV, and it certainly did that. They gave us some demos of the TVs in action with some sound quality terms, and they did sound really good. And the fact that you can buy an optional wireless subwoofer really adds to the audio quality of a TV. Although you could argue that if you're buying a $3 or $4 grand or even more television, you might probably be using some sort of outboard solution. But certainly, if you're not going to do that and you want to use the speakers on TV, they sound really good. No question about that. So yeah, I was impressed with the lineup. Wall mounting, they actually come with the wedge-shaped TVs come with spacers, which means that you can then put them onto a standard Visa wall mounting bracket. And I have to say that whilst I wasn't totally 100% sold on the look of them when they're on their stand on the trestle feet, wall mounted they do look really nice, I have to say. Yeah, it was impressive.
I really like the wedge.
Yeah,
yeah, I do. I think it looks like a really nice looking TV, and like you say, it improves the audio as well. So it's not just done as a design flair. There's actually some technical reason as to why it does that. So the only other thing I'm going to pick you up on, Steve, is the model numbers. They seem to be the same as last year. Yeah,
they are actually the same as last year. But there are some tiny differences, I think. What they were saying was, for example, the X9 005 was what it was called last year, and this year it's still called the X9 005 with a different suffix.
But how can anyone tell anyway? I mean, the television model numbers have long been a source of consternation for me. They're just so appallingly meaningless as to be, they obviously pressed the random number generator and forgot to reset the settings to put an extra year on.
Well, this is just going to confuse everybody.
Well, they do look, but in fairness, they do look quite different. And presumably, you won't be able to...
but if you walk into the shop and you say, I want to buy the X9 Sony, how do you know you're getting the latest model and not last year's?
Well, yeah, good point. Well, that's what they're called. So I guess...
I guess the guy that comes out with the model numbers had the weekend off then, when they did that.
Yeah, I mean, we did ask the question. We said, well, is that X9 still the X9 005? And they said, yes, it is. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, Phil. I mean, it is going to be slightly confusing for the average punter who goes into a store to buy it.
Well, never mind that.
Sony X9.
Never mind that. What about SEO? When it comes to reviewing these things, they're going to be the same title, unless there's a slight suffix change there. But even still,
there will be a suffix change of that.
But it's going to be quite confusing, that, isn't it? It's really, yeah. I guess the guy had the weekend off. So, moving on from the TVs, what else was Sony showing? I know they're really big on high res audio at the minute.
They had a bit of the high res audio. They had the same stuff that we saw. Some of the stuff that we saw at CES. So there was the high res audio wireless speaker. Is it the X9? I think it is. Yeah, X9. And they also had two of their 5.1 systems. So they were sort of all-in-one systems, the Blu-ray player and wireless rear speakers. They basically look quite similar to the ones they had. Again, the numbers are slightly. I think it's instead of the 5,000, it's now the 5,200s. At least they did change the number slightly on that, but they basically look very similar to last year's. They had their the sound bars. The two of the sound bars were the ones that were launched at IFA, so they've already been available for some time now. The other two we saw again at CES. The one that's got a very low, like 5 centimeters high, which was the joke I was making at the time about, they've made the TVs bigger to improve the sound and made the soundbar smaller to ruin the sound. So it's kind of they seem to be going in opposite directions now, making soundbars smaller, TVs bigger. They had, what else did they have? So they had the Walkman that we saw, the high-res Walkman, which we mentioned last week, didn't we? Which £500, I can't see too many takers for. They had as I said, they had their Blu-ray players, which look identical to the design they had this year, or last year rather, with the kind of slightly trapezoidal shape to it. I think that's about it. In terms of
okay, so the big question is 4K TVs. Are we getting their 4K player this year?
We asked that question, and they said not at the moment. There's currently no plans to launch it in the UK. So they were heavily pushing the concept of Netflix streaming.
Oh wow!
So they weren't even they're not launching their 4K player that they have in the States that we saw at CES. There's no plans currently to launch the Video Unlimited 4K download service. streaming service that they were showing at
So
CES.
why the hell would you buy a Sony 4K TV then? Come on, Sony, this is poor. Same model numbers. They're even using the same model numbers for the audio stuff. If the soundbar's an X9, same as the TV's an X9, and they're not bringing the really important stuff for 4K to the UK. That just doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, so they start banging on again about the usual things like, oh, well, up-res HD looks really good. It's like, well, yeah, but actually, if you're watching HD on an HD TV, you're better off because obviously you're introducing any scaling to that. So yeah, it seems strange that the one company in a position to actually deliver some content, because they own a film studio, aren't leading the way. And
well,
I know
not
I got shot down about this last week, but they need to really they need to get on with this because people need to see some content, easily available 4K content, and even streaming is not that easily available if you haven't got 50 megabytes a second, which a lot of people haven't. So yeah, it was they were talking about 4K being, obviously they were banging on about the World Cup because they're a major sponsor, and they were saying the final's going to be filmed in 4K, but obviously they then said, well, we're not a broadcaster, so that's out of our hands. And Sky don't have the rights to the World Cup because it's on BBC, so that's not going to happen. So yeah, in terms of actual 4K content in the UK right now, you really are a bit of Netflix if you've got 50 megabytes a second, bit of YouTube again if you've got a high enough broadband speed. That's it. That's your lot for now.
And if you live out in the sticks, you
live where I live.
Some of us do, and I'm thinking about my parents and stuff who live a little further north than I do, and you can't play a 360 video on YouTube. So how the hell are you ever going to play 4K? Beyond me. So this just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, the whole 4K thing with Sony, if they're not going to back it up with content. It seems really poor to me. But anyway, we need to move on from that. Next, I feel this is going to be a really quick conversation, Steve. The new Oppo Blu-ray player, which is added to Darbee processing. Why?
New player in inverted commas. I mean, it's I understand why they've done this. If you think about it logically, you're Oppo, you're a small company, you specialize in making Blu-ray players. There's no 4K Blu-ray format yet to jump on the back of. So, and you've already delivered the 103, which was a fantastic Blu-ray player that did everything you could possibly wanted to do. So, how do you come up with a new model, differentiate it in some way? What have they done? They've added Darbee processing to it. Do you need it? Absolutely not. Would you use it? I wouldn't recommend it. It's an acquired taste. I know Mark did a detailed review of the Darbee Darblet processor, which is effectively what's been added into this player. And you can play around with it, and on some circumstances it can look it looks a little bit sharper, but ultimately it is processing. It is affecting the purity of the original image, and as a video purist, I would rather not do that. It is still sharpening and dynamic, contrast adjustment and this kind of stuff. Why they added it in, so they got something to sell this year. So I sympathise with them in that sense that there's nothing else for them to launch. But if you've already got a 103, you're fine.
Why not just sell it as a reference player? They've already got a fantastic product. Get rid of the gimmicks and just sell it as a reference player. Because I think everybody that's seen one, reviewed one, has either given it a reference badge or given it a 5 out of 5.
I mean, they are superb Blu-ray players. I mean, obviously, let's be absolutely clear about this. You can buy a Blu-ray player. If you're watching Blu-rays over HDMI, you can spend £100 and it will look exactly the same as the £499 Oppo. I'm not saying that it's going to improve the look of Blu-ray over digital connection. However, it does add, genuine universal playback. So you've got DVD audio, you've got SACD, you've got everything you could possibly imagine in terms of disc support. It's really well built. It's very well supported by Oppo. You're paying for other things, not just the playback capabilities. And yeah, you're right, Phil. I mean, it is. They are great. The 103 and the 105 are fantastic players. You're paying a little extra for a certain build quality and that kind of thing, but you get what you pay for at the end of the day. And if you want a really good reference player, you cannot go wrong with an Oppo, in my opinion. You're right. They could have just kept on selling the 103 and the 105 as they were. I guess they just needed something to hang a marketing campaign on for this year, and they've chosen Darbee. But we all know it's a gimmick, to be honest.
Okay, so let's move on to audio to wrap up on hardware this week, and you've had a look at the new Anthem 710 7-channel receiver, Steve,
Yep.
which comes with ARC. You were bigging these up last year, the previous model, and they have a really strong following on the forum because they do what they say they're going to do on the tin, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I reviewed the 300 last year and Russell did the 700. Both of us were gobsmacked by how good they were for the money. I mean, that's not even fair, not even for the money. They could compete with receivers at 3 or 4 times the price and still be better. They were, and the main reason for that is realistic power numbers and ARC, Anthem Room Correction, which in its first generation, which is what was used last year, was just incredible. The way it could EQ a room was staggering, and the difference in audio quality. It was, the only receiver I've reviewed, I think, that where not only was it fantastic with movie soundtracks, but it also sounded really good music as well, which is unusual for a receiver. It tends to be that they tend to be better at the multi-channel stuff than the stereo stuff. But I thought it was a really musical sounding receiver on top of being really good with multi-channel audio. This year, they have improved ARC. ARC now is incredible. I mean, the only thing I've seen better than the current version of ARC is Dirac Live, and Dirac Live alone cost 2,000 quid before you even got the 17 grand's worth of data set. It's it's so flexible in terms of the way you can set up the Anthem. In terms of it's got features such as quick measurement, so you can just take measurements constantly and move your sub around the room until you get the right spot for it. It obviously measures all of the speakers. So if you've got a 7.1 system, it will measure all 7 speakers plus the sub. It measures them, it shows you the target, and then it EQs it against the target, shows you the graphs before and after. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And the results really are spectacular. I mean, when you buy an Anthem and you open the box up, inside there's the receiver, obviously. There's also a calibrated mic stand, all the software, everything. I mean, you start thinking, well, even for, I think the 710's about 2,300 quid. That's a bargain. What you're getting for the money is staggering.
Yeah, but if you think about the original Odyssey outboard multi 32, which I reviewed 7 years ago now, when this was just starting, and you're paying $4,000 for that, and that didn't include the setup kit. You had to pay another 500 quid on top for the microphone and the cables and the stand and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty staggering actually.
Now, there's a couple of things worth pointing out here. One of the accusations made against, and it's a valid point, last year's Anthems were they didn't have very many HDMI. I think they had 4 HDMI inputs, which is kind of on the low end of the scale. They've now got, I think, 6 or 7 inputs now. So they've upped the number of inputs to basically compare with the competition, which is good. It's still really, in terms of bells and whistles, hardly anything on there, which is, in my opinion, great. I don't want Spotify and internet radio and video processing. I want a receiver that handles multi-channel audio and stereo and does it well, and that's what this does. So yes, I was a big fan of the previous generation. I'm equally as big a fan of this. I do genuinely think that the Anthem at the moment are a little cut above the rest of the competition in terms of pure audio quality. I think ARC isn't at that price point is in a class of its own compared to what the main competition, which would be Odyssey, XT32, even XT32 Pro. So and I don't think they're expensive. The big issue this year is going to be that the replacement for the 300, the 310, only has 5 channels of amplification rather than the 7 channels which was on the 300, which I think might annoy some people. But I guess they've done that because the 300 was such good value and such a good performer. I gave it a Best Buy badge because even at 1,000 quid, they were giving it away. They've obviously dropped 2 channels of amplification to try and differentiate that from the other, the 510 and 710, because I'm guessing they were stealing sales away from themselves with a product that was just too good at that price point. But 710 is a masterful receiver. Really is great. I think they've also changed the looks a little bit, made it a bit prettier, it's another winner from Anthem in my book.
Any views, Ed?
Well, weirdly, I've never actually used an Anthem product, but enough people, both on the forums and in the wider sort of industry, have been sufficiently complimentary that I'd be amazed if this had been anything other than a very positive development. And I mean, for me, I appreciate what some of the EQ and room correction can do. I'm still sometimes find the results a bit odd, but theirs is extremely good. But more's the point, at the end of the day, in the meat and 2 veg sense of the word, it's got proper amplification that delivers the figures it says it does. It doesn't deliver them as a freak blip. It a proper amount of usable power, and they appear to be built like battleships. I mean, I don't know what more you can ask for, really. I mean, I have to say, I do find it amusing that, I mean, okay, 4 HDMIs, I can just about see situations where you might think, oh gosh, I could do with more than that. 7 HDMI sources? What am I missing? I'm struggling here. Even if you've got all the games consoles on the go and a Now TV box and a Sky HD box and a Blu-ray player, you'd still have one spare. So I don't know. I think it's like so many things. It becomes a sort of specification overload. In the same way that, as I say, at the moment we're looking at putting DSD support into everything, even though there's nothing you can actually buy worth listening to on DSD. But hey, that's just me. If that's the only concession to crazy specking that Anthem are making, then so be it.
Excellent. Well, that kind of wraps up the hardware. Steve, what reviews do we have coming this week?
Well, there'll be the Oppo and the Anthem should be up this week, and then early next week, so next Monday probably, we'll have, and this is hopefully there'll be some excitement on this one, the Optoma HD91, which is the new LED projector from Optoma. That's £2,999, which is like basically finding out you could buy a Rolls Royce for sort of 10 grand, because every LED projector I've reviewed before this has been 15,000 quid and up. So this is a massive price differential. I haven't finished the full testing yet. I was playing with it the weekend though, and I've got to say, very impressed so far. Very impressed with it indeed.
Okay, so that wraps up the hardware side of things. We're just going to go and give Mr. Botwright a nudge and wake him up, and come back with the gaming news. So, Mark, moving on to gaming news, something that was announced at CES that I didn't see, but seems to be important.
You didn't really see CES, though, did you?
What's that?
You didn't really see CES.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, PlayStation Now. What's this all about, Mark?
Well, this is the kind of culmination of Sony's purchasing of Gaikai for their cloud game streaming. And yeah, basically, it's a way to kind of monetize Sony's back catalogue of games. So the hope is you'll see PS1, PS2, PS3, and even PSP games able to play on a variety of Sony devices. They showed it off with a demo of The Last of Us, a PlayStation 3 game being streamed onto a Vita, and it was apparently lag-free and working very well. The plan is to start unrolling it in 2014, and in the EU we'll see it 2015, early 2015 hopefully. And it'll also be linking up with Bravia TVs. All the ones produced in 2014 hopefully should be able to use the service, and then it's other partner devices in quotes, which obviously will be mobiles and tablets and the like. It's a very kind of bold move, and it's a really very forward thinking, because they've got this huge amount of content now that there's always been this worry about, well, what if mobiles and tablets kind of almost fracture the gaming market? Well, this is a great way to kind of bridge the divide between the two, so that you can keep selling console games, and the plan is that people can play them on a variety of different devices. I suppose the only real fly in the ointment is that it's not going to be covered by the standard PlayStation Plus subscription, so you'd need a separate subscription to PlayStation Now, but you'll also be able to rent individual titles. So yeah, sounds like a very interesting service.
How do you access the service then? Is it just like an app, or?
Yeah, I think it'll be an app. So it'll be on any kind of devices that meet the minimum requirements. They've just actually come out with how it's going to work with regards to what they're actually putting in the servers, which will be some kind of custom 8 PS3s stuck on one motherboard, because they apparently tried it with regular PlayStation 3 units, but obviously too much size, space requirements, and hugely inefficient. But it shows their commitment to it. 5 Mbps line as a minimum, which doesn't sound too bad considering the overall standard in the UK. And it's going to support all things cloud saves, online multiplayer, trophies, and messages. So the hope is to try and get the same service across a variety of different devices.
So
did they say? Sorry, did they say that they're doing things like? I mean, does this also mean that they would release sort of legacy stuff in a compatible way through to newer material, or is that me putting two and two together and getting five?
The fact that they've showed The Last of Us, I think that the big plan is that, the PlayStation 4 not being backwards compatible, and as soon as they bought Gaikai, I think the plan was always that people would want to play those games. And so it makes total sense that it will be, you will be seeing PS3 games there.
Well, yeah, but I'm actually thinking. I have to be honest, Mr. Botwright. I'm thinking older than that. I mean, it was really weird. We were tidying the house up over the weekend, and I found a very sad, but I'm sure still playable copy of a PS1 game called Overboard, which was just a sort of little weird pirate ship game. And it's the sort of thing where these days an Android tablet could run that without breaking sweat. And it's just the idea of being able to access this. Otherwise, it's not something you'd spend proper money out on. But I could probably be persuaded to part with a small amount of money to have something like that and just tinker about with it after not playing it for 10 or 12 years. And obviously probably remember that it was crap. But, that's how it works.
Yeah, I'd always assumed that it would be pretty much kind of all legacy content there. But the fact that it's come out that it's custom hardware and they've... Every news outlet stressing this point. It's 8 PS3s on one motherboard, and the PlayStation 3 had to have in, the specific chipset, so it could the original 60 gigabytes, so it could play PlayStation 2 games. It wasn't just on emulation; it was literally two machines in one. Yeah. So and there's always been on PCs very, very tricky with, old games that you'd think, well, that could just run on a tablet now, but emulation is a very fiddly task. And so it'll be very interesting to see just how far back they go. I think the question would be simply at what point is it not worth their while even trying to kind of get it up and running, simply because of the cost of what people would actually pay for an old PS1 or PS2 game, that kind of thing these days. But there are a reasonable amount now that are downloadable for that you can play on the PS3 anyway, old games that you can download. So I don't see why they wouldn't make a fair amount of them available, but I can't see them delving too far further back into those back catalogues.
Shame.
I'm still happy playing Space Invaders, to be honest. Galaxians and Defender.
Yeah, it's cutting edge for you country folk, though, isn't it, Steve?
Mark, when we were at CES, along the same time they announced PlayStation Now, they also announced, I think they'd sold 4.2 million PS4 so far. You know what the sales numbers are for the Xbox One?
Ooh, I think, what was it, news last month? I think they said that the Xbox One actually might have come ahead in 1 month in the US or something. But I think they're pretty much running neck and neck in the US. I know that much. But no, worldwide sales, I don't have those figures to hand, Steve.
Have you got both now?
Yes, I have, finally.
And what do you think?
What do I think? Loading up the Xbox One was wonderful, first of all, to hear that it's so silent, which was the big concern. And then you're kind of hit in the face by this weird amalgamated semi-Windows 8 experience, and I honestly felt physically sick. It was so bewildering. I don't understand it. They hide simple things in settings tabs, and this idea of just one button gets you to a different menu, and it never seems to be the most intuitive button that you go to. And so, it is all a different experience. The only thing I would say that did really quite shock me, which was Kinect voice recognition is actually quite good. I mean, there's nothing. There are no big features linked into it.
Yeah, but you don't have a challenging accent, though.
No, that's a fair point. But well, I found, I was saying to Leon that I had a mouthful of food and it still turned it on. You can kind of half garble words. The only problem is that you have to remember what are the key terms, and that's going to be, as it gets more complex, I can see that being an issue. Little things like, was it telling it to quit? Quit isn't a command; it's close. little
So
things like that.
Specific instructions rather than normal English.
Well, yeah, specific instructions. So I think I shouted quit and straight away launched Skype. So it goes for rough approximations. So they're obviously going to keep certain kind of keywords, try and differentiate them.
I'd have hours of fun just saying curly whirly.
Murder.
Murder.
I love you earlier.
Xbox.
If you say quit and you end up come back with a joke because they thought you said quip.
So it looks like Nintendo. Who wrote this?
That was a typo. I wasn't trying to be funny.
So Nintendo, the Wii U-bend, it's going down it. It seems to be that since they stopped making the Wii U's now the main machine, and nobody wants it, and nobody wants to buy games for it.
Yeah, that's perhaps a bit harsh, but yeah, they've
harsh but pretty fair.
Well, they've revised their sales forecast in what was the most obvious thing in the world. It was clear they weren't going to hit 9 million for the year, and so revising it down to 2.8 million, it was one of those kind of last minute things which has suddenly kind of wiped a huge amount off the share price because people somehow didn't see that coming. I don't understand which investors didn't see that coming, but either way, and they predicted there was going to be up for $480 million profit, revised now down to $240 million loss. It sold less than envisaged. They hadn't factored in the fact they'd have to put in a price cut. There was a recent thing, but I think before Christmas, where they worked out how much it actually cost to put together, and it's still a surprisingly expensive console to put together, even when you consider that its power is dwarfed by the kind of other next gen consoles. It's basically that gamepad. I think it's about $80 just to manufacture that, which if you compare it to the type of cut price tablets you can get on the market now, it just seems like a huge drain on them. Their president Satoru Iwata has basically said there's going to have to be a change of approach, but he's kind of nixed the fact that a lot of people are calling for them to be a bit of a third-party developer to switch things over to smartphones and tablets and the like, and he said it's not as simple as just moving Mario over to that. So it'll be very interesting to see where they go from here.
Interestingly, I saw on Twitter, and I don't know how accurate this rumour is, Mark, I don't know if you've heard anything, but a lot of talk about Nintendo being the first to actually come out with a genuine 4K machine. Yeah,
I'd love to say it was rubbish, but I genuinely don't think anyone can predict anything that Nintendo do right now. It's a case of, if you looked at where they were before the Wii, the idea of motion control was madness. The fact that they were releasing what was essentially, people felt was a GameCube with nothing more than this funny little wand that wouldn't sell at all, and people were deriding it and laughing at the name before it came out. But they struck big there, so I wouldn't put it against them to have the kind of Japanese executive culture mixed with risk-taking and just go all out, invest it all, and go for a 4K machine.
All right, interesting. We'll keep an eye on that. And if anybody's got 14 hours to spare, the Games podcast is out this week. Game of the Year, I'm taking the mickey. It's not 14 hours, it's only 2 hours. Still a long podcast.
It feels like 14.
Still a long podcast, but I guess you guys really went to town on Game of the Year.
Yes, there was obviously a lot to chat about, a lot of arguments, and it was less painful than we'd envisaged it would be.
So that's a Games podcast. It's out now.
It's a ringing endorsement, isn't it?
Well, less painful than we thought it would be.
if people had seen what some of our conversations were like when we had the Games of the Generation discussion, that was, I think if it was face to face, we would have come to blows.
I think that's much more.
It'd make for an entertaining podcast, though, wouldn't it? Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Physical blows or virtual blows, or would it just be like? Would you be selecting weapons and stuff?
Yeah, power up. Yeah, hit them on the chin.
Certain moves and that sort of stuff. You have to do combinations on the keyboard.
Anyway, that's a big Games podcast. It's out now. Go and download it. We'll be back in a second with movie news. Okay, so for the first time in about 6 weeks, Steve, the question will be asked, what was at the cinema?
The question was being asked, Phil, but only if I reminded someone to do it. I've actually seen, there's been a lot of films at the cinema. Obviously, we were away the first week of January for CES, and January is very much all awards season. So January and February are when all the nominations get announced and awards get handed out. And therefore, also the big awards players tend to be released at the end of the year or just at the start of the year in order to, A, qualify for the awards, and B, obviously, you want to try and generate as much box office on the back of any awards you may or may not get. So the film I'm going to talk about, as in that's what I saw at cinema, is The Railway Man, but I actually also saw 12 Years a Slave, American Hustle, and The Wolf of Wall Street, which we'll come back to a bit later on when we talk about the Oscar nominations and the current frontrunners for awards this season. The Railway Man is, I have to say, I knew nothing about it. It's based on an autobiography by a guy called Eric Lomax. And it has been the subject of a couple of documentaries, neither of which I've seen. So I was completely unaware of the story. I mean, I knew the basic story because I'd seen the trailer and the poster going into the cinema. So I knew it was essentially about a guy who was a prisoner of war for prisoner of war for the Japanese in World War II. Worked on the death railway in Burma. The film starts off in the early 80s when he's an older man. He meets somebody, falls in love, played by. So Colin Firth plays Eric Lomax as an old man. Nicole Kidman is the woman he meets, and they fall in love. And then, of course, as after they get married, she begins to realize that he has deep emotional issues, basically traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder related to being a prisoner of war. And then there's various flashbacks filling in the story of what happened to him on the death railway. And then later on in the film, he finds out from another friend that one of the guys, one of the Japanese torturers, basically, is still alive, and he goes to confront him. So that's the basic premise, and it's a completely true story. But it was a really very moving film about the sort of the redeeming nature of forgiveness, and Colin Firth's character, for very good reasons. This one particular guy, and he wasn't torturing him directly. He was actually the translator, but I guess because he was the one that could speak English, he kind of focuses his hatred on this one man, this one Japanese man. So he's kind of got all this hatred and these demons inside him, which he needs to in some way get rid of. What's interesting is that there's very few films I've ever seen, in fact, that's the only one I can think of, which has addressed the long-term effects of war. I suppose, obviously we all know war is hell, and you can see Private Ryan or something like that. But this is about, the effects it has on people decades later. And that was interesting. And Colin Firth was extremely good in it. I didn't think Nicole Kidman was necessarily the right choice, because no matter how hard she might try, she can never look dowdy. Although in all fairness, she was, I think, a late replacement. I think Rachel Weisz was originally going to play. Not that Rachel Weisz is particularly unattractive either, but it was a film. A story I knew nothing about going in, and I did find the film to be genuinely moving, and I actually really enjoyed it. If that's the right word, certainly found it. Had a rewarding conclusion.
Okay, Scott.
I gave it 8 out of 10. I think in the review, 8 out of 10.
Okay, I think I followed that. Right, let's move on. Blu-ray's released this week. Sherlock season 3. Anybody picking this up?
Nah, weakest season of Sherlock.
Don't spoil it for me.
I'm not going to say anything other than weakest season of the three. So given I didn't rush out and buy the other two, I'm sure as hell I'm not going to break into a sweat over this.
Yeah,
one.
well, I've seen it already in HD. Good enough quality. Like you say, was a bit off this season, a little bit. I think they went too much for humour, and it didn't really kind of pay off. I'm not going to spoil it for you, Mark. But the wedding one was just ridiculous. Anyway, moving on. Doctor Who Christmas Special now hits disc. Any takers for this one?
Yeah, I was disappointed, actually. I know I just bought it, but I was disappointed because I thought that, and this is Stephen Moffat, who also wrote Sherlock, of course. He has an annoying habit of trying to have his cake and eat it. And this is a good example where, first of all, he eliminates 2 regenerations for some bloody reason in order to address an issue that wouldn't have been an issue for another 2 doctors. He spends a lot of it, well, basically, Matt Smith has spent a lot of it under old age makeup. And one of the joys of Matt Smith's performance as a doctor was he was very animated and lots of physical comedy. And he wasn't able to do that because he was basically playing an old man, which seems stupid to me. I just felt it was a very unsatisfying send-off for Matt Smith, who I thought genuinely was really good as Doctor Who.
Yeah, you still went out and bought the disc. more
Yeah,
for you.
yeah, I know.
More for you.
Reinforcing failure right there.
Yeah.
Look, I'm someone who's bought Dune, the David Lynch film Dune, at least 20 times on multiple different platforms. I don't even like the film. Can't stop.
Yeah, I think you've got issues. Anyway, moving on. Last two that are released: White House Down. Yeah, okay, whatever. If it's a $5, I might pick it up. And Ours, I don't know anything about this one, Steve.
It's Paul Walker's, well, not his last film, obviously. I suppose his last film will be Fast and Furious 7, but it was certainly the film he made just before that, set during the Katrina in New Orleans. And he's, I think he's on screen almost the entire time. He's like genuinely, absolutely the star and carries the whole film. And I haven't seen it. And I know we probably all said in the past when he died that, he was no great shakes as an actor, but apparently he is very good in this. So, if you are a Paul Walker fan or, just kind of a bit sad about him being dead, it might be worth checking out Ours. Okay,
thanks for that recommendation, Steve. To wrap up on movies, I guess we have to talk about the Oscar nominations. I've got to say, I have no interest whatsoever in the Oscars. I never have had any interest in it. It's a backslapping ceremony. I'd much rather watch something like what's the other one that's on the Emmys where they get people like Ricky Gervais to host it.
That was the Golden
Globes. Yeah, at least you're going to get something that's entertaining. And the only Oscars where I really did watch was when Billy Crystal was the compere. Because you knew you were going to get a spectacular opening and he was going to be genuinely funny. Although they did try and bring him back a few years ago and it kind of fell flat, didn't it? So, anyway.
My favourite awards were always the BAFTA, the old BAFTA, not the current BAFTAs, but in the old days it used to be a slap-up dinner. And then after the meal, they'd do the awards.
The other tops today.
Everyone would get rat-arsed.
Yeah.
Can we be very clear that I am not hallucinating when I note that Matthew McConaughey has been nominated for a Best Actor?
Well, no, I was going to come up to this, but since you brought it up, Ed, let's get straight to the Best Actor nominations. Christian Bale for American Hustle, Bruce Dern for Nebraska, Leonardo DiCaprio for The Wolf of Wall Street, Chiwetel Ejiofor, I can't pronounce his bloody name, Chiwetel Ejiofor, 12 Years a Slave, and Matthew McConaughey for Dallas Buyers Club. And can I just say, I've always been a bit of a fan of Matthew McConaughey, but I'll admit he's done some bloody awful films in the past, and he's tended to just cruise it. And people call him Matthew Mahogany. I think Mark Commode used to make that joke. He's had I think they're calling it a reconnaissance these days. He has, in the last 2 years, just utterly changed his persona in terms of he's been doing really good films like Killer Joe and Mud. He was in Wolf of Wall Street. He's really good in that. Apparently, he's fantastic in Dallas Buyers Club. Suddenly Matthew McConaughey has become a serious proper actor. And actually, he won Screen Actors Guild Best Actor award at the weekend. So I'd say he's currently front runner to win to pick up an Academy Award as Best Actor.
Well, it just shows there's still hope for you, Steve. You might be a real journalist one day. Moving on. So that's the Best Actor, Best Actress.
Almost certainly going to go to Kate Blanchett for Blues Jasmine. And the other nominees are Amy Adams from American Hustle, Sandra Bullock from Gravity, Judi Dench from Philomena, and Meryl Streep, as usual.
You see, I'm surprised you went there because I would have thought that Bullock was a tie-in for that because the whole film was basically her.
Yeah, but I think she's going to be overshadowed by the film itself. Everyone's been saying Kate Blanchett since Blue Jasmine came out. I think she's a front runner at the moment. Bullock would be a close second.
See, I think that's the kind of award that Gravity might get. I think the other ones, I don't think they tend to go for.
Last night it won. The Producers Guild, which is usually a good indicator which is going to win Best Film. They actually split the award. They gave it to both 12 Years a Slave and Gravity.
But the Oscars bottle it with sci-fi. Anything vaguely sci-fi.
Yeah, see, this isn't sci-fi. This is more science fact.
I know, but it borders on it. And I just think that there's something too kind of genre about anything that vaguely falls into the ballpark of sci-fi that they just kind of bottle and just think, is this a fad?
This is a good film to do it for. And I'd much rather Gravity won than 12 Years. I watched 12 Years a Slave on Saturday night, and it's one of those films. I know you put up Kaz's review today, Phil, and Kaz is bang on the money. It's an endurance test. I mean, I know slavery was a terrible thing. I don't really need to see somebody being abused for 2 hours. It's just a horrible, and the plot, by the way, is in the title. So, you're going to spend 12 years as a slave. Okay. There's a whipping scene that goes on in real time, one take for about 5 minutes that you just think, well, I don't really want to watch this.
But isn't this just going
to enjoyable?
Will do for kind of slavery as The Passion did for religion. It's that uncomfortable film that somehow they will believe that the public actually need to see, and so therefore will shower it with praise and shower it with awards because of that, almost going overboard.
Well, yeah, I mean, it felt like 12 Years a Slave. It's basically, a film being made to try and win awards. It's the kind of stuff that they chuck awards at, which is why I would rather they gave it to someone like Gravity, which at least was a film. It was a piece of cinema that could only exist as a film, really, and it's almost an experience in itself. I've got a massive problem with The Passion, which an abhorrent film that I hated, and not just on religious grounds, but if you take away the context of Jesus's life and just spend 2 hours torturing somebody, that's just snuff porn. Okay, it was I mean, and letting kids watch that, and that's disgraceful. I'm going for a tangent. 12 Years a Slave, yeah, it's very well made, very well acted, but pointless. And a lot of the other front runners for best film. So you're looking through the best film, and there are 9 nominations this year. They do vary it sometimes. They can go up to 10 if they want to. American Hustle, that's a big front runner. Obviously, David O. Russell did well previously with The Fighter, I think, and Silver Linings Playbook. I saw it at the cinema at the weekend as well, and I enjoyed it, but it's pretty lightweight. Captain Phillips, great film. I would love to see that do well, but it's amazingly... Tom Hanks didn't get a Best Actor nomination, and he is incredible in Captain Phillips. Dallas Buyers Club.
No Tom Hanks, no Emma Thompson either, which were the two big shocks.
Yeah, again, another shock. But Dallas Buyers Club, it's lucky to be nominated. It's pleased to be nominated, but it won't win. Gravity, possibly. Her did really well in the Independent Awards, but it hasn't really picked up much because it actually won Best Actress for Scarlett Johansson in one of the awards, and she's actually just her voice because she plays the voice of the computer in it. Nebraska, which has been getting good reviews, but again, it's not going to win anything. Philomena, yeah, Steve Coogan's got a Best Screenwriting nomination for writing Philomena. 12 Years a Slave and The Wolf of Wall Street. I saw The Wolf of Wall Street as well. Now, at 3 hours long, and it's just a film full of drug taking, bad behavior, orgies, and sex. I loved it, and it was very reminiscent of my previous life. I felt quite nostalgic, but it's not going to do very well because the lead character is a complete dick. What else have we got? Best Supporting Actor. That's wide open, really. You got Jared Leto again from Dallas Buyers Club, who's very good. Jonah Hill, he was in Wolf of Wall Street. His second nomination because he was nominated for Moneyball as well. Michael Fassbender, 12 Years a Slave, got to be a contender. Bradley Cooper, American Hustle. I think he's just in there because people like Bradley Cooper. And I can't pronounce his name. Barkhad Abdi, who was the Somali pirate in Captain Phillips. Again, it was absolutely superb, I have to say. Best Supporting Actress. Good chances might go to Jennifer Lawrence, although she won last year for Best Actress. Sally Hawkins is nominated for Blue Jasmine. There's... it's just the year of people with names I can't pronounce. Lupita Nyong'o, who was in 12 Years a Slave. She was very good in that. Jude Roberts from August Osage County, and someone I've never heard of, June Squibb, who's in Nebraska. Director, right. I reckon this might go to Alfonso Cuarón because he did such a brilliant job with Gravity. But he's competing against David O. Russell for American Hustle, Alexander Payne for Nebraska, Steve McQueen, not the actor, obviously, for 12 Years a Slave, and Martin Scorsese for The Wolf of Wall Street. Thoughts, gents?
Scorsese, maybe.
Yeah, I think Scorsese.
No, people don't like The Wolf of Wall Street, although it's got nominations.
But you don't have to like the film for Best Director. That's the beauty of it. That's almost like a pity vote to say, for Scorsese's trophyless years, we'll throw this out.
Already. You won for The Departed.
I know, but they need to hammer the point home.
No, but Alfonso Cuarón might win this, actually. I think he might get granted, because he's a brilliant director. Just
knowing the Academy, it's going to be Scorsese.
Yeah, that's the point.
This is the whole point, isn't it? It's just like, yeah.
Better not be Steve McQueen.
Let's move away from directors, actors, and so on. Let's have a quick look at technical, Steve, because it is an AV forum, and we all like our soundtracks and stuff like that. So, anything interesting in the technical side of things?
Well, interestingly, I mean, this is the second year this has happened. Obviously, it happened last year as well. The Hobbit. Given how many awards the Lord of the Rings movies won cumulatively between the three of them, although Return of the King, and that is the exception to the rule, I guess, Mark, because it was a fantasy film, but it picked up like 11 wins. I think they won something like 20 or 25 Academy Awards over the three films. The Hobbit's only been nominated in 3 categories, and 2 of them are sound editing and sound mixing, plus obviously special effects. So clearly, that's not getting the kind of love the Lord of the Rings movies did at all. In terms of sound editing, you've got All Is Lost, which is the film with Robert Redford, where he's on his own in a yacht, and it's just him battling against the elements. I don't think there's even any dialogue in it, but clearly it's got a lot of sound.
Yeah,
so,
I watched
clearly.
I watched a documentary about that. It was an online documentary produced by Darbee, and it was really interesting to see how they came up with the sound design on that, because it was all almost like an animated film where they have to create everything from scratch. Really, really interesting to see how they put that together.
So that's All Is Lost. Captain Phillips is nominated as well. Gravity, of course. I mean, Gravity is pretty much in all the technical categories, and I've got a sneaky suspicion it might win a lot of them. Because again, in terms of its sound design, the sound design that to try and stay truthful to the fact that you're in space, but still obviously not have it completely silent. The sound design was very cleverly done. So things were pinpointed to where they were within the three-dimensional space of the film. Or there were things where if you were touching an object, then obviously you could get transference of sound through your body. So that was a very clever sound design, which might pick up awards. And same goes for sound mixing. Gravity, The Hobbit, and Captain Phillips are also contenders there. Visual effects, Gravity again, The Hobbit, Iron Man 3, Lone Ranger, and Star Trek Into Darkness. What we've got? Cinematography. We've got The Grandmaster, which is actually a Taiwanese or Korean movie. Gravity, again, Inside Llewyn Davis, which is the new film from the Coen brothers, which hasn't actually had that many awards. That many nominations, surprisingly, considering the Coens are usually, very popular at come awards time. Nebraska picks up a nomination. That's interesting because it's in black and white. It's a black and white movie, black and white scope actually, which is unusual. And Roger Deakins has picked up a nomination for Prisoners, which I think I'd say was a very well photographed film. I got a sneaky suspicion that Gravity might pick that one up. Although a lot of it's obviously just in space, because I do think it was again, it's just technically such a proficient movie that you're going to think it's going to do well. And best film editing, we've got American Hustle, Captain Phillips, Dallas Buyers Club, Gravity, and 12 Years a Slave. Again, I can see Gravity. Gravity had some brilliant single take sequences, but it was a really breathlessly edited film. I mean, it's an hour and a half long, but it's just a white knuckle ride the entire time. Production design, American Hustle, Gravity, The Great Gatsby, Hurt, and 12 Years a Slave. Costume design, American Hustle, The Grandmaster, Great Gatsby, The Invisible Woman, which is a film I've never even heard of, and 12 Years a Slave. Music, John Williams has got something like his 47th nomination for the book.
How many has he won?
He's won a few. Actually, that's a good question. I mean, he's actually won. I did actually count. He's 49th. This is his 49th Academy Award nomination.
If anything other than Saving Mr. Banks wins that category, there's something badly wrong. In so much of those films, the Saving Mr. Banks score is it's just so perfect for the film that I just can't envisage anything.
Did you enjoy Saving Mr. Banks?
Other than I'm reticent to acknowledge this on the podcast, but other than the fact that I actually got motion sickness at some points during the motion of boats, yes, I to be honest was a little hungover, but I'm not going to.
Were you quite near the screen?
I wasn't too far. I wasn't too bad. It was where I normally sit. It made me briefly ill, but that's not the film's problem. That's obviously the weakness of my inner ear. But I did enjoy it. But obviously, I have a thing for music. I have since listened to the score separately as well. I think it's a masterpiece, an absolutely fantastic piece of work. But given that I, without fail, back the wrong score every single year, it won't.
And the final technical award is Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Now, incredibly, considering the whole film seems to be built around people's bad hair, American Hustle's not nominated, even though there's like loads of massive wigs in that film and all kinds of dodgy looking hairstyles and things, all 70s and everything. But somehow that got sidestepped for Dallas Buyers Club. Jackass Presents Bad Grandpa.
Now, I have to say, for makeup and costume, that is it. Have you seen?
You're right. Yeah, he's made up
as
a granddad.
It's a phenomenal piece of makeup, and it must be said that the child talent beauty pageant sequence in that does count as one of my favourite sequences of the whole year across all film and television. It's watch it with your hand in your mouth, but nonetheless, it's absolutely magnificent. And if you haven't seen it, you bloody well ought to.
I haven't seen it, but on that recommendation alone, I probably will. And the other nominee is The Lone Ranger, so that's not going to win, obviously.
So no, nothing for The Hobbit there?
No, as I said, only 3 nominations: sound editing, sound mixing, and visual effects.
Yay.
Yes,
Okay, so
I think
when
there's enough fake beards for one film.
right, so when does all this happen then, Steve? When's the awards ceremony?
What day is that? It's 23rd of February.
Are you asking or are you telling?
I'm not 100. I can't remember off the top of my head. Hang on.
So I think it was safe to say end of February. So
The end of February. I think it's the last Sunday in February. which
we'll
is
obviously have to come back and discuss this when people have won, and me and Mark will be right that Scorsese gets it. It's always the way. It's a load of shit, the Oscars. It really is.
Scorsese and Bruce Dern, I reckon, will get one.
I'd love it if they quoted AV4. The Oscars, it's a load of shit. Phil Hinton, editor.
Yeah, but I just can't stand awards stuff, and the Oscars just drives me up the wall because it's so far removed from what the common man or the common film goer actually think. So anyway, that wraps it up this week for the AVForums podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I need to thank Steve Withers.
Son, your body's right in check. No, hang on, that's wrong. What's the quote?
Oh, come on.
Son, your ego's writing checks your body can't cash.
Mark Botwright.
Slider, you stink.
And Ed Selley.
The Defence Department regrets to inform you that your sons are dead because they were stupid.
Remember, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark avforums.com for the latest reviews, news and video. And why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening. Don't forget the Games podcast is also available this week. Go and download it. And we'll see you again next Wednesday.